This game is horrible. Exciting Baseball by Konami is one of the worst 8-bit baseball games ever created. The pitcher-batter interaction is okay, but the fielding screen is just awful. It looks like an Atari game gone wrong, and we should be happy that this game never left Japan. But what made this game so bad? And is this game worse than, LJN's Major League Baseball, the game that I keep picking on? Plus, is there anything that we can salvage from this game? Well, let's go into a deep dive to find out more. But first, we really need to talk about the Famicom Disk System. Alright, this baby right here is the old Famicom Disk System. It came out in early 1986 as a way to increase the amount of memory that games could use and to reduce the price of new games. And the discs looked like this. So these were a variant of the so-called Quick Disk 3-inch floppy disks made by a company called Mitsumi. The disks were also two-sided, which meant that a single disk could hold about 112 kilobytes of memory. Now you have to remember that when the disk system came out, most games were 64 kilobytes or less. In fact, the old black box games, like baseball, used something like 24 kilobytes, at least as far as I understand. In other words, the Famicom Disk System really was a big deal. And of course, some of the most famous Nintendo games originally were disk system games. Metroid, for example, started out as a disk system game on August 6, 1986. Super Mario Bros. 2, which we know as The Lost Levels, was a disk system release on June 3, 1986. And the most famous of all was Zelda no Densetsu, The Legend of Zelda, which was a disk system launch title on February 21, 1986. Now, if you compare these games with the NES cartridge counterparts, you'll notice that the disk system versions have better sound. Most other things are similar, however. Now, the other advantage that the disk system games had was the ability to write to the disk. You could save scores or other information right on the game disk. This was back before most games used the battery save method, which is the one that you and I remember. So this was a pretty big deal at the time. You could also overwrite your disks with new games. So if you got sick of playing the all-night Nippon version of Super Mario Bros., you could replace it. For a lot less than the price of a new game, you could stick a different disk system game on top of it, like ice hockey. Now, there were a few sports games for the disk system, though there weren't quite as many as you might expect, but some of those games were pretty famous. Nintendo's original Baseball was a launch title for the disk system. It's not different from the original at all, which I think is a real shame. I was hoping it would be a port of the Versus System version, which is a lot better. Anyway, I mentioned ice hockey a moment ago, which also started out on the disk system. The sound is different on this version. And then you've got this game, Exciting Basketball by Konami. Of course, we know this game is Double Dribble. It's a port of the old Double Dribble arcade game, which I think most people have probably forgotten about. This is similar to the NES version of Double Dribble, though it's missing all of the cutscenes. Anyway, Konami went basically all in on the FDS market, and for a good reason, too. Well, back in September 1986, Konami released Akumajo Dracula for the disk system. We know this game as Castlevania, and of course it was a huge hit. However, starting with Exciting Billiard in June 1987, Konami put out a string of sports games on the system. That includes Exciting Basket, or Double Dribble. There was also Exciting Soccer, Konami Cup. There was Konamic Ice Hockey, which we know of as Blades of Steel. There was also Konamic Tennis. And there was the infamous Exciting Baseball. Well, Exciting Baseball is clearly the worst of those games. That's absolutely beyond a doubt. Let's look at why. Well, I've played this game for a couple hours now, and I still don't know how to control the base runners. I think I'm supposed to push A and the base that the guy is standing on to advance, and I think that B makes him go back. However, sometimes the base runners just do whatever they want. And if one base runner passes the other, the guy who was in front just disappears and is apparently called out. The fielding system in this game is also really, really bad. Well, it's not that bad once you get used to the horrible frame rate. I mean, you can usually catch up to the ball. However, sometimes the player just simply won't pick up the ball, which is really frustrating. The most frustrating thing of all, though, is that frame rate. I mean, this has got to be less than 10 frames per second. It's like watching one of those flipbook animations that some kid in class made. But you know, even with those major flaws, this actually is not the worst baseball game I've ever played. It's really bad, yeah, but I've seen worse. It takes a while to get used to the hitting. However, once you get a feel for the speed of the pitches, it's actually not that hard. Sure, it's not like as smooth and obvious as hitting is in Famicom. But at least the computer will throw different speeds and will throw curveballs. That's a lot better than Major League Baseball by LJN, where the computer just throws the ball straight all the time. Although I will say that at least the frame rate in the LJN game is reasonable. Anyway, pitching in Exciting Baseball actually is fun. You can throw these crazy pitches that look like Sidewinder missiles. I found this thing in Biweekly Famitsu where you can apparently throw a low ball and then raise it up as high as you want. Anyway, the physics are really quirky and don't make sense, but the pitching is still kind of fun. It's the fielding that you really want to stay away from. But the best part about this game is the way that things are customizable. You can change tons of stuff in this game. You can change the name of players and teams. You can create your own players and your own teams if you want. You can change all sorts of settings and stats and stuff like that. This is where the Disk System feature really shines. Now, there is a reason why you probably won't want to do this. You see, the problem is that Konami didn't really do a good job of allocating different things on the disc. In other words, when you play this game, you've got to flip the disc over and over and over again. The wait time in this game is really long. Actually, this is a problem with every single Famicom Disk System game. The disk system was slow and you had to turn the discs over all the time. In Exciting Baseball, I found myself turning the disc over at least twice just to play a single game. And you have to turn it over even more if you want to mess around with any of the editing features. I mean, I don't know, maybe people were more patient back in the summer of 1987, especially in Japan, but honestly, I really don't think so. You see, the Famicom Disk System was already pretty much obsolete by the time that this game came out. In fact, the system itself was as good as obsolete in early summer 1986. Okay, early Famicom games like Donkey Kong were 24 kilobytes, like I said earlier. The disk system could hold about 112 kilobytes of data, which is a little bit under 5 times the size of Donkey Kong. However, this cartridge game came out in June 1986 and just blew all of that out of the water. The Famicom port of Ghosts and Goblins, which is what that game is, could hold 128 kilobytes, and this was on a cartridge too, not on a disc. Since it was a Famicom cartridge that used ROM chips that plugged, directly into the system, you didn't have to wait. And so now you had bigger and better quality games because of the bigger chips that had no loading time. That's what caused the death of the Famicom Disk System. Now, in Konami's defense, I think that I understand why Exciting Baseball was so bad. So Famicom was the gold standard for baseball games back in those days. However, even with only 10 teams, Famicom was a pretty big cartridge for the time. This excellent post by the blog Nerdly Pleasures tells us that Famicom was a 96 kilobyte cartridge, or 4 times the size of the NES baseball game. Now, if you wanted to make a game with all sorts of editing capabilities and more players, it would naturally take up more room. And I really think that's what the problem was. Exciting Baseball was so full of extra features that there just wasn't enough room to make a playable baseball game. Anyway, that's my theory about that, and who knows, I might be wrong. One thing I know for certain, though, is that Exciting Baseball is really, really bad. Now, I do like the interaction between the pitcher and the batter, and editing all the stuff in the game is pretty cool, but everything else is just simply awful, so stay away from this game.